Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party with our regular and anticipated Sunday night live feed. Thanks for joining us, and I hope that this is a discussion that you can have with us tonight. It's a pretty general discussion about what it is that you want from politicians, what you expect from us, how you expect us to represent you in any election, particularly if you're in South Australia and the state election, which is coming up very soon. So join with us, have a conversation with us. We'll be going through your comments as we progress throughout this evening. So let us know. We want to know. We're desperate to know what it is that you would like to expect from us that's going to make a difference for you when it comes to politics. Now, we know that one of the issues that people talk about apparently is about the dysfunctionality of politicians. So we'd like to talk to you about that. What is it that you want from politicians? We're not politicians. If we get into Parliament, clearly we would take on that role. But what would that look like? What would it mean to you? What sort of things would you like us to be able to do for you if we were able to win a seat in the Legislative Council? Or alternatively, what would you like us to do, just general politicians, if we were to stand for a seat in the federal election in the Senate? So how do you want to be represented? What are the issues that are important to you? Tonight we're going to go through what we think are a few of the key issues and have a discussion with Avery and Clinton in a moment about all of that. But we want to hear specifically from you about the things that you think we should be talking about. So, and I'll say, Karen, thank you. Good to see you on board as always. And if you'd just like to say hello to us, we'd love to hear from you. We'll keep a note of the comments as they come through. But more importantly, tonight we have, as we do a lot of nights these days, we have Avery and Clinton. So I'd just like to welcome you guys on board. Good to see you.
Hi,
How's
Tony.
you been?
Yeah, I've been good. Clinton?
Good.
Good afternoon.
There we go. It took a while to come through on my screen. So, but it's good to see you guys. And tonight's an interesting discussion. Just don't know how do you guys feel about having a type of discussion? So we're not talking specifically about child protection, or we're not talking specifically about looking after kids in being carers and leavers and foster care and all the other stuff that we talk about. What do you think about tonight's conversation, which is just about the issues that we think people are interested in generally?
Well, personally, I don't think there's a single issue that a federal or state government is going to talk about that's not going to have some impact on children in some way.
Yeah.
So every decision they make is going to affect children now, or it's going to affect our kids in 20 years' time.
That's right. What do you think, Clinton? Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, definitely. I think everything that we're going to talk about tonight, obviously it has its own categories, but everything comes down to how can we make Australia better for our kids? Absolutely. We have had many conversations about over the years about there is not a single decision that is made that doesn't impact children, basically, from the expenditure on submarines to climate change. So there's every issue. And the problem that we have, I guess, is that decisions are not made with the children in mind. Decisions are made by vested interests, which are corporations, political people who have got interest in their own ideology, but not necessarily with the kids in mind. And I think that's an important theme about Child Protection Party, is that that's where our focus is. Do you guys agree with that? Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. There's a thing I've just seen, a comment that you might want to address.
Yep.
Uniques Jones, I did tell you what I thought. My story and even spoke on the phone, and yet SFA was ever done. Now, I don't think that's the sort of... I think what you're talking about for tonight is what changes would people like to see made in legislation if we got into Parliament.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't know who this Jones person is. And if you want to contact us, I will put down my mobile number for you to call me. I can't remember having a call from you, but may have. We deal with a lot of telephone calls, so it's hard to know.
Yeah.
But if you want to give me a call at the end of this conversation, I'll be happy to speak to you. Quite simple, really.
Yeah. The point I was trying to make there, Tony, was that it's what you're saying. Tell us what changes you want to make. It's not changes that'll necessarily about a specific person. I think what you're talking about is a piece of legislation. If we could change one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, and we've got one from Gregory now who says we'd like agencies accountable for DCP to work for the children's safety, not their own pay packets. SADCP couldn't organise a regional brothel. Okay, must ask them if they do that sort of thing. Accountabilities is hidden behind a title, and Wolverine DCP, the epitome of incompetence. Gregory, there's not anything apart from the comment about the thing in the brothel. I don't disagree, but I guess there are lots of other that's an important issue. And Greg, I know that's an important issue for you. I'm sure that the Jones person, I don't know whether it's a male or a female, I can't tell by the name, but these, and I know that these are issues that are important. There's an expansive set of issues, though, that we need to find some space to address, and they are issues around education, health, mental health, physical health, disabilities, and climate change and the impact that will have, and so on. So these are also important issues. Can you guys think of other significant issues that we need to confront as well as CPP and potential politicians, I guess?
Well, the ones that you've got listed on that chart, which you haven't yet shown from the Lowy Institute.
Oh, we'll do at the moment. Yep.
What I was going to say is I think that covers the major ones. I mean, there's nothing mentioned on that chart from Lowy about child protection in general, or rather specifically. There's nothing. That's not one of the 9 options that they offered, and I think it should have been.
Well, I think I agree. I'll bring that up. Is that okay, guys? We'll bring that up, have a conversation about it, because those sort of points, Avery, are really worth talking about. So I've just got to get myself a little bit organised here. Here we go. So this is the chart that Avery is talking about, and we noticed that at the top of this chart is education. So this is pointing out the general population. This is back in 2016, but it'll still be relevant today. They might change fractionally, who knows. But education was at the top of concerns. So the black area is a very important issue, so we'll just deal with the black areas. So these are extremely important issues: health, domestic violence, and then the economy. And then down the bottom, interestingly enough, the rise of China. That might have changed over the last few years, given what's happened in China in the last 4 or 5 years. But certainly education, health, domestic violence. Now, do you guys want to comment about that? Because they are integral issues. They are important issues for us, don't you think?
Yeah. One thing we should make clear as well is that what we're looking at right now is national figures.
Yeah.
We can break it down by state if we want to.
But because I think the state figures don't vary all that much either,
no.
Avery, from these. So we'll just work with these. So let's start with education, because that seems to be where the most interest lies at the moment. And if you've got any comments about how you would like education to be changed or manifest in a different way for children, for your children, the things that you're missing out because the education system isn't providing whatever you need for it, let us know in the comment section, and then we'll get back and have a look at that. Clinton, do you see some aspects of education that we as a political party should be addressing?
I think education is a key driver in most of the stats that you see in the Lowy Institute. I think before we went live on air, I was talking about the how Australia is ranked from OECD countries. So I think education ranks 30 out of 38 for educational quality. So that's 30 out of 38 countries internationally. And that's pretty low for Australian standards.
Yeah, I thought that when you talked about that, I thought that was an amazing statistic. So how many countries were there below us or above us?
I
Whatever.
think
We were 38. Did you say 38
38,
of how
38
many?
40.
38 out of 40. So there are only two other countries. And so with that was countries with similar
Sorry, 30th out of 40. Sorry.
Okay, but that was
So there's 10 more. Yeah,
and they were countries economically equivalent to our own.
they were. Yeah, and 20% of Australian children have significant difficulties reading. That was the two main aspects.
Yeah, and certainly, do you see some ways by which we, as a political party, could advocate for? I don't know whether it's better training, better services. What do you people that are watching us now think? Well, what would you like to see happen? I think that we should have more SSOs for kids that are struggling, so that they have more ongoing support for them. I think that we should be able to identify earlier kids that have got that are challenged in terms of their own learning, and we know that a lot of this stuff happens at home. So often parents are not in a position to be able to help their kids learning. They just don't seem to have the time, whatever, or the inclination sometimes or they're dealing with their own issues, so they don't have the time to sit down with them and do the reading with them, follow through on what the kids are learning at school, to follow through on their homework and so forth. So, and I think there are a lot of parents perhaps who just don't see the importance of education in the first place. Do you guys have any views on any of that?
I've definitely got a view on education. A few weeks ago, I remember you and I don't know whether it was a live feed or we recorded a YouTube video about my views on education, which is that it should be free, completely free of charge, no cost whatsoever for your child from the day they enter the childcare, the pre-K, whatever, until they graduate university or TAFE, whichever they have to do, whichever course they path they decide to take. Because education is an investment in our country, in the future of our country. It's not a burden. There's countries like Sweden and Germany where education is completely free, and it doesn't matter what country you live in. If you're an Australian citizen, you go to Germany, you can study for a university degree or their equivalent of TAFE free of charge. Right? We should be doing exactly the same. The Germans do it that way. The Swedes do it that way because they see it as an investment in the future of their country. And Germany's particular view is it's an investment in the future of the planet.
Well, and also I think what does happen, I remember watching a video on this not long ago too, Avery, is that a lot of those people that study for free in those countries stay in those countries. So that's not about exporting their academic qualifications elsewhere, or what's the word? I don't know. But it's not about sending that expertise elsewhere. That expertise stays in the country. We know that when I think it was in America, they were saying that a lot of Chinese people, who come to China to learn to study, something like 80% of them remain in the United States after they've finished their studying. So then they benefit from the type of education and the expertise that these people learn and bring with them. So I think that's a great point. Now, why isn't it that we don't have education completely free from preschool, kindergarten, right through to university? Does it cost us? Would it cost us more to do that than it would to build these boats that sink? Like is it? Why are we investing in stuff which none of us will actually, unless you work in that industry, none of us will really benefit from? But the education side of things, we will all benefit at the end of the day from that. So really good points. Clinton, do you want to add to that comment?
Yeah, I think education is really important. It's really important. So right now, in Australia, on a national level, 1 in 6 children in Australia live in poverty, and that's a huge number of children. So that's 1.2 million, roughly, children. What would happen if those 1.2 million children had access to free education?
Yeah,
it would help. It would get them well and truly across the line.
Yeah.
And we know, don't we, that kids or people that have got a higher education have usually better outcomes. Because university does teach you sometimes about how to manage the world that sits around you, and it gives you a sense of confidence, I guess, that you wouldn't have. And I'm not talking about necessarily university education, a TAFE education, a profession, a trades type job as well is
just
extremely important.
Just a decent high school education,
absolutely,
is far superior to the sort of education that they get where they give up at the age of 12 or 13 because they've lost interest. Because it's one of the problems I've found I've always thought with teaching, I've seen it here, I've seen it in the UK and Canada, and that is that the way teachers work, or the way they seem to, is a kid will put his hand up and say, "What do I need to study this for?" And the answer is always that you need it for the exam, right? The kid says, "So what? I don't care. I'm not going to be using simultaneous equations when I leave school." The kid doesn't know to ask the right question is, when I leave school, how is this going to help me? The kid doesn't know the right question to ask, so they just ask, "Why do I need to learn to study this?"
I think I agree.
The teacher should be taught, part of their training should be to identify questions like that and say, "Okay, we're talking about simultaneous equations. If you decided that you wanted to go into the field of electrical engineering, this is how it would help you."
Yeah.
Right.
And we've lost Clinton for a bit.
Give real world examples of what's happening.
Yeah. And I think also the important part of education for me, Avery, always has been that Clinton has returned. The important part of education for me has been about building one's self-esteem, because I know that personally when I was a kid, I did very poorly at school. I don't think I ever passed an exam, in fact. And I know that damaged my sense of being able to accomplish anything for that matter. And even though I was very good at sport didn't cover it in terms of how I felt for most of the time when I was trying to study or whatever. So I think it is important to make school a lot of fun as well.
Yeah.
And also we must remember that school is also a place where many kids can feel safe. And we need to be able to have programs that ensure that kids are well fed, for example. So they need programs for breakfast programs, more of those. We don't do enough of that. There needs to be programs for lunches and so forth as well. There needs to be funding for after-hour care so that parents who can't get to pick up their kids at appropriate times can do whatever work they need to do and have their kids cared for appropriately after school. So there's plenty of areas there that we can cover, and we would be most interested in hearing what you people online have to say about any of that.
We're going to be spending something like, was it 80 or 100 billion dollars on, as you put it, boats that sink.
Yep.
And we're going to be spending about $60 billion on airplanes from the United States that aren't as good as certain ones made in Europe. I wonder how much of that, if they were to, instead of getting 12 submarines, we'll get 6, right? Yep. How much difference would that $50 billion make to education of our children?
And at the end of the day, the additional benefits that we derive from all of that, apart from when we're making stuff, where the people that are building it and those people employed in that area, I guess, are the people that are benefiting from it. But beyond that, and I guess maintenance and other stuff might occur later, and some technology is developed as a result of some of those projects. I grant all of that. But at the end of the day, it's the kid down the road that needs the opportunity to be able to, where we're investing in him as opposed to investing in a product that might be employing his dad or mum. I accept that.
Yeah.
But we need to be investing in the individuals. That's the point that I'm making.
Yeah. And the thing about education, the governments here and in the UK, they look on education as a burden on the taxpayer instead of looking at it as an investment in the country's future.
Yeah.
You invest in that child and that child and that child, and that one's going to go on to find the cure for cancer, and that one's going to design the latest and greatest, the 7G version that's going to drive the conspiracy theorists crazy.
We live in. Maybe they'll come up with 6G. I don't know. That'll affect our.
But the
neurons.
point is that the investing in education is an investment in the country.
Well,
And
also,
saying to people, you must pay towards this, we already do. It's called tax.
Yep. But the problem with politicians, I reckon, is that they can't see the long term. They're only thinking beyond up to the next election. Beyond that, they can't think any further. Avery, I do want to come back to that video that you shared with me today. I don't know whether Clinton, did you see that one on
Climate change?
I did, yes.
Yeah. South Australia's not doing too bad is it, in that sense.
South Australia is leading the world, apparently, or second in the world.
Second in the world.
Second in the world.
In terms
Only
of producing other forms of energy apart from coal. It's a great video. Avery, you just pop in that video down the bottom, and the comments would be probably pretty helpful if you wouldn't mind doing that. Because we'll just go to the other two areas that we just wanted to talk about, which came up on this chart as well, which were the next one that we want to talk about is health. So the difference between education and health in terms of the number of people that thought these were very important issues was 88 to 83. There's not much difference between those two, but health was important. Now, Clinton, I'm wondering if you can tell us why it is you think particularly health was an important issue. And where does that relate in terms of kids and stuff?
Health is a really important issue in Australia. Generally, Australia is a wonderful place to grow up. It's a wonderful place to live. But in saying that, it's not an equal place. There's some people that are more equal than others. And it kind of depends where you're born in Australia, how healthy you are, how well educated you are, how well off you are. And health is a really driving aspect of that. There's people in Australia with some real chronic health conditions that really bump up the health budget. That really it's quite costly. And if you're well educated and you're better off. You get a better job. You increase tax, so the government gets more money. So there's more services. So health is a really important area for us, for the Child Protection Party, to talk about.
Yeah, and I think that that also we know, I think there's some statistics, I can't quote them right now, but there are certainly some statistics that will tell us that also in terms of education, the better the education that someone has, also the healthier they're likely to be, because they're more likely to make some healthier choices, or better choices, I guess, around how to conduct their lives. And also they have more money to be able to do the things that, go to gyms and do that other fancy stuff that I don't do. So people are more inclined to be healthy, I guess, if they've also got a good education. I think the point that I want to raise too about discussing health is that one of the issues that concerns CPP are kids' mental well-being, and the lack of funding that sits around the looking after kids who are cutting themselves, or kids that have got some form of suicide, or not some form, but have got suicidal ideation, kids that are living in violent and abusive households and how they're coping with that, and also the mental well-being of kids, that back to this issue around struggling at school. So, there's so much that needs to be done. I mentioned in a podcast I think we did last week that a client contacted me whereby they weren't able to get their kid, who was 17, 18 I think, into a youth mental health service because they were booked out for 6 months or more. So there's this lack of interest, guys, in working with families and kids, because families and kids, I think, are kind of like at the bottom of the ladder. They're not. Yeah, this is why CPP exists, isn't it? Because those things are important to us, but they don't seem to be important politically. Would you see it the same way, Clinton?
Yeah, it definitely is. And just to quickly touch on a comment that I see in the chat, Karen is saying her oldest son starts high school this year, but he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go to the school that I think he's been assigned to. If that's right, Karen, he wants to go to another school. So that's obviously causing him some issues because he doesn't want to go to school now.
Yeah, and there's that there's this lack of flexibility, I think, that fits around a lot of this stuff as well, because kids have to go to schools for which their kind of area in which they live and that sort of stuff. And I think, and the other thing too about education is that's a state issue. And no matter what state you're in, it's the same problem. But again, it's really about lack of foresight, lack of understanding, their inability for politicians to be able to recognise the importance of education per se, and their inability to be able to fund it as a result. But also this mental health issue. One of the concerns for us is that I wonder how many kids, we don't get stats around youth suicide generally, and I understand the reasons why. But I do wonder how many kids wind up taking their own lives or indulge in risky behaviour that in turn either harms themselves, disables them, or causes some other form of mental or physical problem. So, and we really need to be finding a way to make sure that all these kids have got the best possible opportunity that they can. Because this is a big gap, guys. Kids are not being cared for in the way that you and I would expect them to be cared for. People ignore the needs for kids. They sit at the bottom of the ladder. And we really need to raise their profile so that kids do it. And the thing is, not everybody has kids, but certainly the parents and the grandparents of kids. You don't have to be involved in the child protection system to know that your children are not being looked after now and probably won't be looked after in the future. They'll be told they have to fend for themselves as adults and haven't got any support to help them to grow and have effective and productive adult lives. So these are key issues. The other one that I wanted to... Do you guys want to add anything to any of what I just said?
I very quickly do.
Go for it, Avery.
You and I did a live feed a few weeks ago about kids harming themselves. I've just shared the link about that on there.
Thanks, mate.
After we did that live feed, the same question came up about how many kids are there any figures for the number of kids actually harm themselves when they're in care or kill themselves? I wrote to Minister Sanderson, and all I've had so far is an acknowledgement, and that's it. Yeah, we received your email. Thanks very much.
So basically, in other words, they're not interested. And they're not. And we need to call that out. Politicians are not interested in the well-being of children. Let it be said. Right? Except us as a political party, we are. This is our focus. This is what we do. These are the conversations we have every day with parents, not so much with children, even though I've got a few clients, I guess, that are kids. But ostensibly, these are the conversations we're having about the problems that kids are having growing up, either whether they're in out-of-home care or not. It doesn't matter all that much because the services are lacking, because people just don't, at the end of the day, care. So the other topic that I will be going to, which we will now show, is domestic violence. And here it's interesting to note that it's 79% of people consider this a very important issue. I would suggest that, and since Batty was the Australian of the Year, that had been elevated, the stuff around domestic violence. 79% of people. I don't know. I haven't got the. We do have a breakdown here of male and females on that, don't we? Somewhere.
We do. If you want,
female, I've got it. I've just got it here. So,
under gender.
Female is 85, and it's not even on the agenda for men. No, sorry, that was the ACT.
73% of men.
Male was 73%, and I've got to come back again. Female was 85. So I guess we could still argue there's a number of men who are concerned about this particular issue as well.
Yeah, the number of women who are concerned with domestic violence is greater than the number of men, but it's still not an insignificant number of men.
No, that's true. That's true. And on age breakdown, see, even amongst 18 to 29s, young adults, it's still pretty high. It's 76%. 30 to 44, 74. 45, that's an interesting one. 45 to 59 jumps up to 83%.
Yeah.
And 60 and above is 84.
Yeah.
So we could argue the 45 and above are extremely concerned. In fact, almost as concerned about this area as they are about the economy. And I think that tells us a lot about people's awareness now around domestic violence. Our focus is not just about the relationships that people have and the damaging types of relationships and dysfunctionality that sits around them. Our focus is around also the impact that has on children, primarily. And knowing that, this is domestic violence is like this catastrophic event that happens in a kid's life. When you think about it, they have got a mum and a dad often that they care about. They notice them fighting and behaving badly between each other. We won't say, one of them is often the victim of that, normally the women. But, and the role models that tend to be created as a result of that behaviour, particularly for men, just perpetuates the violence as these kids grow up to be adults. Clinton, do you got a view on all of that as well?
Yeah, I think domestic violence is huge in Australia. It's a huge issue, especially for children as well. And it can have, it happens in a short space of time sometimes, but it can be long term, and it also has lifelong impacts. There's lots of children that grow into adults that can spend their whole lifetime getting over their childhood, which was faced with domestic violence. It was based on their parents, assaulting each other, drinking. Alcohol is rife in Australia. To be honest, I enjoy a drink, but domestic violence is one of the key drivers. Alcohol consumption is one of the key drivers of DV in Australia nationally.
Yeah. But I think that one of the I read I can't remember the guy's name. Avery, you might be able to help me. But about 10 years ago, a woman was killed was stabbed by her partner in the festival centre, I think it was, in front of 300 people, in fact.
Yeah, it was not quite 10 years, about 7 years ago.
Yeah, and there was an article in the paper about the son who hasn't spoken to his father for all these years, but wanted to go to see his father to see whether his father was remorseful. And there was some doubt as to whether or not his father was, and whether or not he'd be able to have an appropriate conversation with his dad. But one of the things he did say that I found fascinating was that he could see from his father's behaviour in relation to the things he said to him that he could have headed down a similar controlling, abusive behaviour as his father had done. And it appeared that it wasn't soon after, it was after his mother had died that the guy, because they've now set up a foundation, he and his sister, in his mum's name, to to help people that have been through or going through domestic violence. But I guess it wasn't until this horrific event happened that he realised how damaging his father's behaviour was, and then reflected back on all the things his father had said to him as a kid, and realised then that he was being groomed to be the same sort of male as his father was. And I just couldn't help but think how many kids go through exactly that same problem. And that doesn't mean that just as a male, you're the one who is involved in coercive control and abuse and so on. It's also about women who may choose to be, for varying reasons, we understand this isn't a criticism of women either, but who choose to be the victim in that. So, if you grow up in a relationship, you grow up in a family where the woman is continually put down, denigrated and humiliated, then some young girls would think that that's their lot in life, I guess. Does that make sense?
It does. Time flies when you're getting old, doesn't it? Because I was convinced it was only about 8 years ago. It was actually in 2010.
That's right. I was right, Avery.
Yeah, you were
so
right.
I accept your apology.
You're younger than I am, though. So.
Oh, this is true. Heaps younger.
I've just shared the story about it on in the feed there.
Thanks,
it was
mate.
a guy called Zia Allo.
I don't know how. If his name was John Smith, I would have remembered it, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's Iranian by the sound of that.
Yeah,
I think at the time of this thing was written, he was waiting for sentencing. This was posted in 2012, so he'll be in jail now. And what you were saying about what the kids said, what the son said, is all on that page.
And that he was, and the article that I was referring to, I think was this last week. So,
all right.
But so I guess the point is that when we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking about some dramatic, traumatizing effects that impact kids and how they can interpret the world. And I guess he was reflecting back on how that had been for him, and potentially what may have happened to him if he'd continued thinking about that in the way his father did and started treating women in the same way. And he was dedicated to working. So he's got a young son who's 2 years old, and he's committed now to ensure that his young son doesn't have the same messages presented to him in the same way that his father presented those messages to him. So I think that's an important issue, and that Clinton, as you say, domestic violence in this country is a bloody pandemic of its own, isn't it? And that we need to find ways to, it's like a virus in our own community, but we tend to ignore it because it's not happening directly to us, or we can't catch it from somebody, but we can teach others how to be violent and abusive. And then there's a lot of stuff that we need to do in terms of who we are as men, I think, and how that needs to be reinterpreted, reinvented in ways which are about being respectful. So so guys, that's the that stuff. I had a quote here, which was from, I'll just read it out to you. It's from Mission Australia. I thought this was really interesting. I don't think it will appear on this page because I haven't set it up appropriately for it. No, it doesn't. I'll just read it. I'll just read it out. And it is: now is a critical time to make sure young people are heard. Young people can and should create and advice on solutions that will address issues that affect them, other young people, and Australia. The youth survey, they're responding to a youth survey done by Mission Australia. The youth survey is just one way of capturing the voices of young people, but they are telling us that they want to feel heard in political and decision-making decisions. What do you guys think about that?
Absolutely. Children need a voice. That we should take into account what they've got to say.
Yep. And in your work, Clinton, do you find that an important aspect of what you do? Listening to people.
I think it's one of the most important aspects. Just touching, Karen's comments in the chat. Her son isn't being listened to by the school and by the teachers. Listening to children is one of the most important things we can do about what they're feeling, about what they want, about their worries, their concerns, their mental health. It is really one of the most important things we can do. And sometimes people look at you a bit funny when I'm in a meeting or I'm in a room and I ask what the child thinks. They're like, "What are you doing? There's 12 other adults in the room and you're asking him." I mean, well, we're all in the room because of him, so let's ask him. I think we've got a long way to go in society to really value children in Australia.
Absolutely, mate. Well said. And I was watching I think it was an Australian Institute of Family Studies seminar a week or so ago, where all the professionals were talking about the ways by which we should listen to children, and we should hear what they have to say, take it on board, and make it part of the process, rather than dismissing them and saying, "Well, us adults know better than what you do." Kids know their lives, and they can tell you what they're afraid of, and they can tell you how to deal with that too. They've got stacks of information, some of these kids, but we ignore them. And one of the criticisms was that professionals fail to hear them over and over again, that we know that this is in the kids' best interest. We know that kids, and I just want to get back quickly to child protection. We know that kids are saying what they want, who they want to live with, and how they want that environment to be. But within the child protection system, they don't listen to them at all. How different would all of these systems be, whether it be education, mental health, around domestic violence, how they see their family? How different it would be if we just listened to the kids. So, guys, before we leave, any final words about where CPP sits around any of these issues?
I've just been looking through the comments that we've got in there. You read the one out from Gregory where he was saying about holding agencies accountable. Yep. Julian Tyrode has suggested that we shouldn't allow government or NGO child protection workers to foster children because it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Karen is talking about getting the kids back. JJ, Jevon James Hire, a great guy. One thing I would like to see change is the child get taken from the parents. Sometimes the child gets taken for the smallest things. He would like to see children taken away from DCP when one child gets abused in the DCP's care, and then the carers should be held responsible. He'd also like to see the DCP workers do as many.
Go on, sorry.
I was going to say he'd also like to see the DCP workers do as many parenting courses as parents have to.
Yes, and a lot of that's always an interesting point to me, because so many of the social workers don't have kids because they're pretty young generally, but they also are taught the language to use, and they're taught the education prospects of what happens to kids, but they're not taught the practical stuff, so they don't have often that practical knowledge about how to work with kids. They don't have the experience to do that, and most of what they say, I guess, has to have come from a textbook. I'm not saying that you necessarily need to have had that experience to be a good social worker or good work, because Clinton's one of those. I mean, I know that Clinton probably has a number of kids stashed away somewhere, but he's not prepared to talk to us about it. But you can just use common sense. Like, Clinton, I know that you're really good at what you do, and when you're working with young people, how hard is it just to listen? How hard is that? Not very hard at all. How hard is it to take on board what they say and construct something around that has meaning for the kid?
Yeah.
It's not hard. It's not rocket science. But sometimes you've got to give...
It appears to be rocket science, because the DCP and FACS and whoever just don't give a shit about them. They will not take into account what the kids themselves want.
Yeah, and part of the problem is I work with this great bloke who lives some few hundred kilometres from us. But so I speak to him on the phone, and they often get involved in DCP meetings, and the social worker there is horrible, and she spent. I timed her at the last meeting. She spent 90% of the meeting talking about herself. And it was supposed to be about it. So if you've got social workers who are more interested in talking about what they know than they are about what the client knows, what chance do they have listening to the kids? And what they know and what they want. So, okay, guys, thanks for tonight. Good conversation. Do we know what we're talking about next week?
Not yet.
Clinton, got any ideas?
No, but I think if people have something on their mind, if they have something they're frustrated about, put it in the chat. We'll discuss it in the weeks to come.
Or they can send it to secretary@childprotection.party or admin@childprotection.party.
And the other thing too, before we go, I just wanted to mention, and that's this thing. Avery, do you want to talk about donating now to the Child Protection Party?
We have got an election coming up in... I got my mic on. I do. We've got an election coming up on March the 19th, and we need a minimum of $6,000 to pay for the candidate's registration, because it's $3,000 per candidate. We want 2 candidates because with 1 candidate only, we will be below the line, and that would kill our chances completely of winning a seat. So we need donations.
We're not asking for a heap of
$5
for somebody, but look, if someone's got an extra $5,000 they want to give us, we'll be more than happy to receive it. To be quite honest,
$5 a month, $5 a week, whatever.
And I guess, Avery, if people want these changes to take place, and they believe that CPP and us representing you can work for you in this way, then it's a great investment, because I can guarantee you that we will work our butts off to make sure that you get the representation, so that you can have the issues that are important to you represented in Parliament, because we will be pulling the plug on certain things that the government want to do unless they do some of the things we ask them to do. So, Somebody asked me the other day, what could we do if we got elected into Parliament? And I said, they said, because you wouldn't be in government, you would just be a member of the Legislative Council. And I said, yeah, well, here in SA, whichever government is, whichever party forms government, they're going to sometimes want our support to get a particular bill through Parliament. So we say, you want our support, you can have it, but you need to do this. Yep.
And here's this piece of child protection legislation that we demand is changed. That is the price of our vote.
And a case in point was social work registration.
Yeah.
Which was a bipartisan event, but was presented by a Greens member. Could have been presented, but it was supported by the Greens and an independent. So there are certain things that we could, for example, if a person has an issue happening at school, and we want the department to be a bit more transparent, we can ask questions. We can go to the media. We can do a whole host of stuff, and certainly there would be more attention placed on us under those circumstances than happens now. So,
another thing there, Tony, is that say you are an MLC, member of the Legislative Council in South Australia, and somebody comes to you with a story. If you were to say John Smith, who is the perpetrator, outside of Parliament, you can be prosecuted, but you can name that particular person in Parliament.
Yeah, because
you've got parliamentary privilege, so you can really bring it to focus, bring it to the attention of the public.
Well, I hate to say this, but if there are social workers who are,
you wouldn't want to get me. You wouldn't want to get me in there, because I've been naming them like crazy.
But also, if there were social workers that were behaving inappropriately and they needed to be named,
you can name them.
Name them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the thing is, we can't do it. We can't do any of that without getting somebody elected into the Legislative Council in South Australia on March the 19th. And to do that, we need a minimum of $6,000 to nominate 2 people, so we can get so we can get the party name above the line, which is where 95% of people vote. If we're a single candidate below the line, we can we might as well not spend our money.
That's right. So donate, do it now. You go to that page there and give us some of your dough. It would be nice.
$10, 10,000.
Okay, guys. Look, thanks very much for tonight, and we look forward to catching up with everybody next Sunday. If you've got questions, as Clinton said, if you've got questions that you want to ask us, if you've got issues that you want us to discuss, please let us know what they are. We will discuss them. And just take care.